Hello everyone, and welcome back to another remote sensing lecture video. And in this video, we're going to pick up where we left off, talking about the interactions of electromagnetic radiation with matter. And if you remember back to our previous video, which is the diagram that I have up right here, we sort of outlined those three interactions, right? Reflection, transmission, and absorption. And what I want to do now is I want to expand this sort of micro concept to talk about what we're actually measuring in remote sensing. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to actually we're going to answer the question, what does a remote sensor actually, let me improve my handwriting there. What does a remote sensor actually measure? Actually measure. All right, what does a remote sensor actually measure? And to do this, we have to expand upon these concepts to talk about a much larger scale. And so I'm going to scroll down here a little bit, give ourselves a blank canvas to work with. And we're going to start this discussion the same way that we talked about the single leaf. And we're going to start this conversation up here with the sun. Now, instead of talking about just a single leaf, we're going to talk about a much larger portion of the Earth's surface. So this is the Earth, right? And then we're going to have over here right? This is going to be our sensor. All right, so we're going to start this with the sun, the Earth, and the sensor. And just to sort of keep things in line with what we had before, on the Earth's surface, we're going to have a giant leaf. Right, so we have this giant leaf on the Earth's surface. This could be a tree, this could be a car, this could be anything, right? We're just going to recap what we did before. And so our previous discussion, right, we had electromagnetic radiation coming from the sun, hitting the leaf, and then some portion of this bounced off, right, was reflected. Right? If it was absorbed, it stayed in. If it was transmitted, it would go and hit the actual surface of the Earth. But some portion of this was reflected, right? And we're going to keep this simple, and we're going to say that it was reflected in the direction of the sensor, right? So this is reflected. Right? So this is the basic diagram that we drew last time. And if we stopped here, you'd say, oh, well, the sensor is just capturing the amount of radiation that was reflected off the leaf. But it's slightly more complicated than that. And the reason that it's more complicated than that is by something that is happening, is by something that is happening in between the sun and the Earth and the sensor. And that something is something that I think we oftentimes take for granted, and that is the atmosphere. Sorry, let me improve my handwriting a little bit. Right, and that is, the atmosphere. Right. That is the atmosphere. Because you have to remember something, right? When we talked about this idea of these interactions occurring in, let's say, a single leaf, those same things are happening to every object on the surface of the Earth, and it's also happening in the atmosphere. All right, so you have to realize that the sensor is not just getting the reflected off the leaf, but it's also getting some energy, right? Actually, let me do it this way. Right, some portion of that energy that was coming in is being transmitted through the atmosphere, hitting the leaf and being reflected. Some portion of it is being reflected off of the atmosphere directly. It's also reaching the sensor. Right. And some portion of it coming from over here maybe, right, coming from a different part of the Earth's surface, is actually being bounced around in the atmosphere and hitting the sensor. So this is being reflected. Right, but it's being reflected off the atmosphere. And then this over here, this squiggly line we drew here, this is actually being scattered. Right? So now, not only does the sensor have the reflected stuff off of the intended object, it's having stuff that's reflected off the atmosphere, and it's having some portion of radiation that wasn't even part of this original amount that's being scattered from somewhere else and reaching the sensor. So let's sort of condense that. So currently, under this particular setup here, right, the sensor is measuring one intended reflection, right, and the intended reflection is this stuff here that's coming off of the area that we were actually interested in. 2, it's measuring this atmospheric reflection. So it's atmospheric reflection. Make that less ugly. Sorry. Atmospheric reflection. And then finally, it's measuring this bit here, which is the scattering. Right, and the scattering is the radiation that wasn't even part of what we're interested in, right? It was just this part right here, right? It was going somewhere else, and because of the atmosphere, it managed to be scattered and hit the sensor. So this is what the sensor is measuring. It's measuring, just to sort of reiterate, it's measuring what we expect it to measure, which is the amount that's being bounced off the Earth's surface, plus some portion that's being bounced off the atmosphere, plus other radiation that wasn't even part of what we're trying to measure that has been bounced around in the atmosphere and ends up hitting the sensor. So these 3 components here. Right? So hopefully you understood that, because what we're going to do is we're going to throw 2 terms on here that are going to encompass everything. And I'm going to do these in white. So the first term we're going to throw on is the energy that's going down, the energy that was produced by the sun. Right? The incoming radiation, right, is called irradiance. Right? Irradiance. So irradiance is the incoming radiation. Right? Irradiance is incoming. So the way I like to think about it is IRR, so irradiance is incoming, IN. So ear, in. So they both, the eyes match up. Irradiance is incoming radiation. So this is everything that the sun is outputting, and then everything that's measured at the sensor, right? Everything that the sensor is measuring is called radiance. And radiance is outgoing radiation. So just to sort of clarify, this is all this incoming and outgoing. This is relative to the Earth. So irradiance is the radiation incoming to the Earth, and radiance is the radiation outgoing from the Earth, right? It's relative to the Earth. So just to sort of recap that again, irradiance is incoming radiation, and radiance is outgoing radiation. So hopefully you understand this diagram. So what we're going to do in the next lecture video is we're going to build upon this. We're going to show some examples and sort of pinpoint really what the sensor is measuring. But for now, I just want to stop here, give you guys a chance to memorize this diagram, understand the different parts, understand where energy is coming from and where it's going. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.